Hey everybody, welcome back to the Live Ultralight podcast powered by Outdoor Vitals. Today we are going to be breaking down an upcoming event that both myself and Darren here have in common. I'm going to be rerunning the Tushars Mountain Ultra 70K, and Darren has signed up this year for his very first Ultra, and he's going to be doing the 100K event. So we're going to break this down. We're going to talk about kind of why we're doing this, but also what we're doing for training, and just kind of giving you a very raw, authentic piece of soundbite here before we do the event. So then, you guys can either laugh with us or celebrate with us on the results of the event and if we get the desired outcome. So it's always easy after you finish a race or a hike or whatever to say, oh, that happened how I expected it, this. But if we actually sit down and capture this beforehand, we can't go back on our word and say, no, I never said that, or I never thought that, or, so I think in some ways I'm looking at this like, I'm probably going to do what I always do, which is overestimate what I can do in a single day. Thankfully for me, at least, I've done this race, and so I have a little bit more of an idea, how this day is going to turn out, or how bad it's going to suck, or fill in the blanks. But there's always things that come up in the moment. So hopefully I don't put my foot in my mouth too much by the time we get to the results of this and how it actually turns out. But yeah, I thought this would be really valuable for the listeners, though, to be able to just learn from the way that we're approaching this, because there's a ton of overlap, whether you're a trail runner or whether you're a backpacker. Everything I've ever learned about trail running the last 2.5 years or so that I've dabbled has been directly transferable to backpacking. In a lot of ways, running is kind of pushing the limits of things. So it's easy to take the limits and then tone it back a few steps and apply it to backpacking. And the only thing that it's ever done is just help me be a better backpacker, feel better on the trail, go to elevation better, all of those kinds of things. So, all right, Darren, I'm going to start off with a question. For those of you that don't know, maybe Darren, let people know what you do around here and how long you've been around the joint.
Yeah, so I'm the first Outdoor Vitals employee. When Tayson got Outdoor Vitals going, we were buddies beforehand. We actually worked together, and he got this company started. It started taking off for him, and he messaged me and just said, "Hey, I think you'd be a great fit if you want to come over." And at the time, it was kind of it's like, should I? It was a new company, new startup, and I wasn't quite sure what I was getting myself into. But we'd worked together, and we'd worked well together in the past, and it was a chance that I was willing to take that risk on, and I did it, and I don't regret it. So here I am, the director of e-commerce. So anything that deals with any website upgrades, web software stack, ordering, our Amazon integrations, anything that we have going on for that, I'm kind of in charge of and kind of help manage that. And so we've worked well together. I think I've been here for, it just hit 8 years.
Since 2015, yeah.
So 8 years. We just barely hit that anniversary mark on that. So we're still going strong.
Yeah.
Still good relationship. Relationship goals.
He still tolerates me, so it's good.
No, it's been good.
So big question here would be, you watched me train for and go on this run last year.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was pretty rough for me to get through that race last year, and I think it's a surprise to both of us that we're both signed up for this race again.
I specifically remember when you got done telling my wife, "I'm glad I didn't do that." And
you telling your wife?
Yeah, I was telling my wife that I was glad, because last year I was considering doing it.
That's right. I was trying to convince anyone to come run it with me, and no one would.
I was just like, I actually ran a booth at that event, and it was pouring rain the entire time. And I was like, man, this is miserable. I wasn't even running in it. I was under a canopy, and I had a nice stream going underneath my feet during this entire race, like just at the event booth.
On flat ground.
Yeah, on flat ground. And I'm like, man, those runners really must be getting pummeled. And I remember afterwards, I'm like, man, those guys are just getting hammered. So yeah, I remember you going through that.
Yeah, I actually avoided the rain for the most part. I like the clouds. Literally, I was on one side of the mountain when they're on the other, and then we switched positions basically, and I got really lucky. But I'm mentally gearing up for rain. But one thing I would say, and I wonder how much this plays into the stuff we do, is that we do share a love of listening to books, and we've got a few that we listen to that are motivational, I guess, and kind of be like, yeah, go try some of these crazy things, kind of listen to just stories. And how much of that played into your decision, or how much of like what drove you to try this, especially after seeing me do it and just get my trash kicked that first year?
So for me personally, we both do love listening to those motivational type books, just any online books. David Goggins has a saying. He's like, I don't like to do crazy like the things I do aren't crazy to me, they're just different, and so I kind of resonate with that. I'm not new to running. I've been running since elementary school. I remember my mom waking up at 4 a.m, and just to be a little bit closer to her, I'd go with her, and it'd only be 3 to 5 mile runs, but I've been running my whole life. So as far as like these long ultra runs and seeing you suffering through that last year, but still completing it was really motivational. Initially I was like, man, I'm glad I didn't do it. But then there's like some things that kind of happened like prior to that. So we did the Grand Canyon rim to rim to rim. And I just remember thinking, man, this is going to be like one of the longest runs I've ever done in a day. And I got my trash kicked. And I've never had that happen while running. And it got really personal to me. Just like, man, I've never cramped before in my life. I've never had to really worry about the nutrition I was putting in my body, or like not hydrating enough. That was just not a thing. And so after that, I was like, man, I need to change something, and I want to try something new that I don't know that I can do. So I have no clue if I'm going to be able to do this race, but that's kind of my why. Is like, I'm hopeful.
Yeah. You've said multiple times that this is going to be one and done.
Yep.
Pretty sure I said it was going to be one and done last year for me. What do you think about that still? That statement or that idea?
I still highly agree with it.
Yeah.
It's so much of a time suck, the training that goes into this type of thing, that, man, I miss sleeping in on Saturdays. And so I look forward to sleeping on Saturdays again. So for me right now, yes, it's still one and done. I'll continue running, but not with this much of a commitment to it.
Yeah. Well, then I don't know if I touched on this already, but I signed up and did the 70K last year, which is, I tracked like 45 miles, but should be around 42, 43. Darren, you didn't sign up for the 70K. You signed up for the 100K.
Yeah.
Which is more like 62 miles.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's going to be super crazy because I haven't even signed up for more than a half marathon as far as like official competing. I've gone further distances, but this will be the first time officially trying to go for something that far. I know that I can run marathon distances. I know that I can run 50K distances. I don't know if I can do a 100K distance. So is there any chance that you would do another trail? And this is probably a question for after, but maybe if you just didn't do such big races, that you might still do more races. Maybe more like marathon level trail races, or because you just stay in shape year round. You run year round, whether it be on treadmills or on outside, but you're getting miles consistently. So I'm just saying, don't say never. I could see you going and doing this. So that's my prediction, is that Darren will run another trail race in his life, although he's pretty adamant that this is one and done. So we'll see if that prediction comes true. Let's talk just a little bit. Let's give some backstory for those of you that don't know much about this race, and just kind of talk for a second about, this is a very difficult race. It's, I've seen one of the bigger runners out there equate it to like a mini Hard Rock, or if Utah had a Hard Rock, which, I don't want to say that myself. I think that Hard Rock is incredibly difficult. But when it comes to like the amount of vertical climbing and descending,
per mile. It's not much behind Hard Rock's race profile. And for those of you that know what Hard Rock to me is the most difficult trail race in the United States. And it's just running at altitude, straight up and down mountains for 100 miles. Basically, what we're doing is running at altitude, straight up and down mountains for 40 to 60 miles. And so the race starts at a ski resort at 10,000 feet. And then from there, essentially, you're just going up and down at 10,000 feet or higher for the rest of the race. It does peak out going over the third highest mountain range is the Tushars. So the peak there is like 12,200 feet. So it does that's the top of the race. And then you just kind of keep going up and down and all around circling that peak. At one point, you do drop down off the mountain, and I don't remember just how far you drop down. It might be 8,000 or 7,000 feet. And then you basically turn around and hike straight up the mountain over 3,000 feet of vertical, just straight again. So you do drop to that low of elevation for half of a second in the race, and then you just turn around and come straight back up the mountain. But it's incredibly difficult. And doing that all at high altitude is a whole nother set of challenges, both in terms of acclimation, both in terms of, are you getting any training up at that altitude, because things can change, how your body might react. There's weather that can roll in on those mountains in no time. And so I know people that have DNF'd that race or didn't finish that race due to lightning, or they just said, nope, I'm out. Like, this got crazy, I'm done. There's just all sorts of extra challenges. But yeah, starting at 10,000 feet is just a whole nother set of challenges. The trails are rough. There's sections that are okay, but there's a good amount of sections that can be rough and loose and not like good graded trails with switchbacks at times. You pretty much climb straight up Delano. I mean, it would be nice if there were some switchbacks, but it's just like straight up the mountain. Good, a couple 1,000-foot climb straight up. So it is definitely difficult. So I just wanted to give kind of that background context, because to me that kind of plays back into the why for me of like, why the heck do I do this? Because it does suck. It does suck to wake up at 4 a.m. to go running. It sucks to feel tired, after runs on a day, to try to do everything. I try to do everything I can to not have it sacrifice family time or work time. And usually what that equates to is sleep time.
Yep.
It's a lot of what you give up. So, why would I do this? For me personally, I said this in the documentary that we filmed last year of the race. And what I said was, I think I do it because I'm not good at it. And in a lot of ways, I think it pays big dividends to be humbled at things in life and to try new things, because you learn, you grow, you push your body, your mind in different ways. And by doing something that I know I'm not good at, we can get into that later. I know I'm not an excellent trail runner. And I probably never will be unless I make massive lifestyle changes and choices. And even then, good chance I would never just have the genetics. But I think that the reason I did it was I like to do hard things. I like to push myself in new ways. I also, once I start down a trail, I usually like to feel like I finished that trail. And last year, at the end of that documentary, I think I said I did it and I never need to do that again in my slurred speech that's how far gone I was. And I came back and was just like, you know what? Like, that was not, I didn't actually accomplish my goal. I don't think, from the outside perspective, there's people that are like, are you going to finish the race? And that was finishing the race was an absolute challenge and goal to be commended and accomplished. And I think from the outside perspective, a lot of people, that was the goal. And I even said that was the goal. But internally, what I wanted, what I was, shooting for, I did not hit that goal, which really was to finish feeling like I ran the race I wanted to run, ran the race that I set out to run with my own goals. So I had some other goals, like finishing in the daylight hours, and I finished after dark, and just not finishing in a literal state of, I was in a bad position. Like, other people probably would have been seeking medical aid, but I'm probably just too stubborn, right? And so to me, that didn't feel like I completed it, because to me I knew I could walk the race. Like I could just finish it if I just stayed on the course long enough, kept moving, and so it was like it was an accomplishment, but it wasn't what I set out to do. So to me, I started on this road, and now this year it's going to be more about going and finishing it. It's going to be about, still being able to run, at least some of the sections by the end of this race, instead of just be walking in pure misery. So, for me, that's a big thing. And I really enjoy showing my kids, that I can go and do hard things, and just hopefully, anyone else that I can inspire along the way too. So that's why I'm signed up again to do this crazy, crazy thing. Trail runners out there are probably like, man, this is the best thing ever. And the rest of you are saying you guys are absolutely crazy. And we're kind of probably somewhere in the middle here. But, okay. So let's talk a little bit about how the race went for me last year. And then let's talk about our training.
Okay.
And our predictions, I guess, is where we can get to. So for me last year, the race, like I said, I didn't run the race that I wanted to run. And this year in training, I've gotten more insight. So I've realized that last year we did a rim to rim to rim fast pack of the Grand Canyon in May, and I got more injured on that than I think I wanted to admit. My tibs and my shins essentially got really wrecked. My calves were really tight. I had a lot of knee pain for a time, and I finished that. So we did a 38-mile day on that, and that's with the fast pack, loaded up with gear, water, food, and that really wrecked me. There's a ton of elevation in that day, a ton of descent, and then right after I got back from that, I went out to the Appalachian Trail, did 100 miles out there, and then I came back to do training in June at home, and my training was just totally derailed. All of the big runs I was supposed to be getting out on, I couldn't do, and then basically my last runs in July, I went and ran a 9-mile up and down trail that I run pretty consistently for training. And I was happy because I didn't have any knee pain during the run. And that was the first time I didn't have knee pain during the run from that injury. And so I think in my head, I was like, okay, I'm going to be good, And now this year, I realized just how injured I was, because last year on that run, by the time I got to mile 10 and up to mile 13, I was already in excruciating pain, specifically in my shins and in my lower legs, calves and stuff. And now I'm getting out on trail runs and doing 15 to 20 miles and finishing with no pain, no cramping, no issues really. And so to me, I've learned a lot, which we'll get into, but I think I also underestimated the fact that I still was injured going into that race last year. So that's one thing that I am happy about. But that race last year, I definitely messed up. So I actually just pulled some numbers. I did an AAR, an after action review, and just jotted down as much as I could from what I remembered happening in the race. And so I jotted down how much water I thought I drank between aid stations, what I ate, and I think it's fairly accurate. And I knew that I hydrated, and I knew that I also underate, but I didn't realize to what extent that actually happened. And so when I just quickly ran through things, I estimate that I drank about 12 liters of fluid in the day, which I'll get to in a second, is not nearly enough for me specifically. And that I only ate, and this is the kicker, that I only ate 2,200 calories the whole day.
That's
and
crazy.
That kind of shocked me, because this year so much of my training has been on fueling and hydration, every step of the way. That's as much of the training and effort I've put in as much as the miles I've been putting in. And there's probably things I ate at an aid station, a bite here, bite there, that I'm not tracking. So, let's just say it was 2,400 or 2,500 though. On a day like that, I'm probably burning 7,500 to 10,000 calories, and I only fueled 25%, only replenished 25% of that. Rule of thumb is that you're replenishing at least 50% of the calories you're burning. Your body is going to burn fat out there. And so, the rule of thumb for runners would be that you're going to eat, if I burned 10,000 calories in that day, that I would have at least eaten 5,000. Usually it's 5,000 calories of carbohydrate. So that was a real shocker. I literally just added that up 20 minutes ago and saw that
That's
number and
crazy.
was like, that's mind blowing that's all all the food I actually got down because of how sick I felt and so on and so forth. So knowing those numbers, that was some of the things that I did wrong. I was way dehydrated by the end of everything. And I just missed my hydration marks like all the way through the race. I started cramping, which was probably due to the injury more than the hydration. And then I started to do some crazy things with hydrating. I started to double down, take a ton of salt to try to stop the cramping. Then all the salt made me not want to drink the water. And then I quit drinking the water, and it just spiraled out of control. To mix with all of that, then I didn't feel like eating because my stomach was not feeling good because of me trying to hydrate or taking too many salts, and it just became this massive spiral downhill. So this year, really the goal was to, obviously do the miles, do the training that I needed to do, but it was also to master as much as I could how much fueling I needed, and to even try to train my gut to handle that.
Do you remember what you were eating on the trail?
Yeah. So, I was eating things like the liquid calories is like the number one thing. So liquid calories means a high carbohydrate drink, such as Super Fuel. I think it's called high carb drink now by Scratch. They renamed it, but it's something that we should have on our website. You can find it there, but it's basically just I think it's called multidextrin. It's a type of carbohydrate that they put into this, and so it's like 7 scoops of something you mix into water. You're like, that's never going to mix in. It eventually mix in, and it's 400 calories that you're getting in one drink. So that was the number one thing that I ate. But then I had gummies, so Honey Stinger and Scratch gummies. I had a Honey Stinger waffle, which I actually think that those don't do well for me. I've decided that in terms of running, I swear those just don't go down and stay down very well. But I had a few of those. Had like half of a banana at an aid station. I couldn't even eat the whole banana. Oh, one thing I didn't see on here, which I did do, was I had like half of a peanut butter jelly sandwich before it fell out of my hand because I couldn't grip it. But yeah, the bulk of where I actually got the bulk of the calories is I think I drank 3 or 4 Super Fuels, which would equate to, what is that? 12 or 1,600 calories.
Yeah, something like that.
Of all of those calories came directly from that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So this year, that's been a huge focus. So basically on all of these runs I'm going on, I've really been trying to focus in on that. And I've done continued sweat tests. And the crazy thing is, so many of my sweat tests just tell me that I need to drink 1.5 liters of fluid per hour.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those big question marks for me. I know I drank 12 liters of water in the Grand Canyon, and I left that day thinking I could have drinking more. I know I drank 12 liters of fluid on the race last year, and I was way underhydrated. And according to my calculations, if I was actively running for, say 11 hours, well, that's 11, it's like 16, 17 liters of fluid if I'm hitting hydration marks, which I've never consumed that much fluid in a day. So that's a big unknown. And that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but don't knock that until you've run 45 miles and saw what your body really needs, because it really does need it, at least for me, with my sweat rate. So this year, that's one of the things I've been really trying to focus on is when I go out on runs to have, if it's a run that's going to take me 2 hours, I will have 3 liters of fluid on my body, and I will do everything I can to drink those. As far as the electrolyte side of things, though, I did a sweat test last year, and it said, you're losing like 1,800 to 2,000 milligrams of salt per liter of water. And what I've found personally is, while that is true, I've researched some other stuff, and my take on it is that if I can get about 1,000 milligrams of sodium per liter of water in my drinks, and then anything that I eat is just kind of extra on top of that I'm in a pretty good spot. I think that over salting it really messes up, gives me GI issues, gut issues. And then, obviously undersalting is going to lead to cramping, but I actually think that hydrating is more important than just pure salt. In fact, the number one reason that I think salt is super important is absorption purposes of the fluid. I have found 100%, I have found this, which is if I drink clear fluid, meaning nothing added to it, it can flow straight through my body. Whereas if I mix in the electrolytes, my body can absorb it. And it's been pretty phenomenal because I've really pushed my body sometimes. Sometimes I'll drink a half a liter in one quick stint while I'm running or more, and just see how I feel, if it's going to mess up my gut. And if I've got good electrolyte mixes in there and whatnot, I can do that, and my body seems to absorb it very quickly, and it doesn't just mess up my gut and make me feel sick and, throw up or whatever. So that's been a big part of it. From the calorie side, my aim is to eat as close to 500 calories per hour as I can. So if you back up again, that would be about 5,500 calories in the day if let's say I was running for 11 hours. And again, that's like ridiculous. That's like best case scenario. But even if I get that much and it takes me 16 hours, that's going to blow the doors off of what I did last year in terms of calories consumed. So yeah, I'm trying to consume, maybe a little bit more realistically, 200 calories an hour, 400 calories an hour. But if I can push that up at all and stay at 500 and keep my gut in a good position, it's just going to do me more favors than not, right? And that's kind of a lot, right? But I'm a bigger framed guy. I'm well over 6 feet. I'm 200 pounds. I'm not the typical ultra runner who can run on like 200 calories per hour and like a half a liter of water an hour, which is kind of more equates to where Darren's at now. Darren, there's some big question marks for me I'd love to ask you about, because you're like a mountain goat out there to me. Like if you had a spirit animal, Darren, I would just say mountain goat. You and Derek are, both fall into this like mountain goat category to me, because I've seen you do some of the most crazy things I've seen anyone do, which is one time we were hiking, it was like 2018, and we dropped our packs. Well, Darren dropped his pack and let a marmot chew on it for a few hours.
Yeah, that was fun.
It had to have been, had to have been still like 6 miles from the top of Kings Peak.
Yeah.
We had to ford snow, getting derailed by big massive snow slides and banks, and then just miserable conditions to be hiking Kings Peak in, which is the highest peak in Utah at 13.5. I watched you hike for most of a day with a bottle of water in your hand, one bottle of water in your hand.
Well, to be fair, it's one of those old school life straw water bottles, so I could fill that up on the go.
Did you fill it up on the go?
Yeah, I could.
So you didn't just drink half of a liter?
No, not on that day. Okay. I've had days like that, but that was not one of them. Like,
okay.
Yeah, like that was just
I had that
one
wrong in my head.
Yeah, like the other one you're talking about is on the Oak Creek Mountains.
Yes, some of the hottest desert mountains I've ever been in. We were actually out there. I was helping him with the hunting tag that he had, and I was sitting basically under a tarp all day long, baking.
100-degree weather all day.
I mean, you're in the mountains still, but it's just so hot, so much of a desert. We were in a burn area, so it's extra hot. It's dark, and I watched Darren go across the canyon, and he went all day on a bottle of water. You had a Red Bull, I
had a Red Bull as well.
Like you drank a Red Bull
one
at
of
the
those
bottom of the
8-ounce
canyon.
Red Bulls. Yeah,
mini Red Bull at the bottom of the canyon, and then you went the rest of the day on a single bottle of water. I can tell you personally, I probably would have ended up in the ER trying to pull something like that. And, I think you were thirsty, but you were fine for all intents and purposes. You weren't like losing coherence or anything like that, so it just blows my mind what Darren can do. And then throughout this whole training process, I have been grilling you to find out, have you done a sweat test? How much water are you taking on your runs, et cetera, et cetera. And you have the ability, it seems, to be able to run like 20 miles of trail with little to no water and little to no food. And so I can't really fathom that, but
I can. Yes. So Tayson does ask me all the time, like, what are you drinking? How much are you tracking? It comes up all the time. And
You've done a sweat test.
I have done a sweat test, and it is important information. It's like I found on one of my last runs, it was like 2 weeks ago, I was doing 31 miles. That was one of the first times I'm like, I should have brought more water. Like, I actually...
You started with how much, or you had...
I had 2 liters.
Okay. In 30 miles.
In 30 miles. And my wife joined me for the last 10 of it. And she's like, you're really slowing down. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm at mile 21 right now. Or no, it's 25. That's when she said it. And I was like, yeah, I'm feeling a little thirsty. Yeah, it's like I had I don't know, swig of water left. And, like at that point when we finally got back to the car after that run, I was like, man, I should have brought way more water. But, doing some research on that, like I'd been fueling and whatnot, like, and I don't track as well as you. Like, I just know that I have a couple bag full of cashews, I have Skittles, I've got Pop-Tarts, things that I'm just kind of experimenting to see what my stomach does, and I ate that stuff, and it definitely helped, but I definitely needed to hydrate more. I had, as far as like electrolytes, I brought those quick straight to mouth packets that you can just dump in your mouth and drink some water, and that helps. But I was on that one specific trip, it was running out in the desert hills. There was just nowhere for me to get more water. So I know the importance of it, and yeah, I will be drinking a ton more water on this run.
I think the shocker with that for me was I've been asking over and over and over again, and you've been doing a lot of 20-mile efforts.
Oh,
and you were like, yeah, I took a liter of water and I was fine.
Mm-hmm.
I was fine. I felt okay after, and and I just kind of keep asking, and it never came up. And it wasn't until you pushed up to 30 miles when you were like, yeah, I kind of hit the wall finally. And to me, let's say your wall was 25 miles in these type of trail conditions and situations, that still just blows my mind that you can go that far before hitting the wall of both calorie or hydration or either one of those, which to me is why I call them like a mountain goat, because, goats notoriously, they don't have to drink very much water. They can live very high. I think a lot of mountain goats can just get enough water oftentimes through what they eat and not even really have to drink water. They're basically, like a llama is kind of the same thing. And a llama is from the camel family, right? You can, if you take a llama into the high country, which, I think I'm going to bring a guy onto the podcast that backpacks a lot with llamas, so I'll get more info on this. But you only have to water them every other day, maybe every third day, because they are literally in the camel family. But to me, goats are pretty similar, and that's just kind of how I see it. It blows my mind, because if I do that, I kid you not, if I took 1 liter of water out and I just had 1 liter of water, how far could I go? I would probably guess around 10 miles. Around 10 miles would be where I would start to feel serious degradation in performance and start to get really uncomfortable with things. So it's just wild. You're quite a bit lighter than me, but you've run your whole life, and then there's just genetics too that probably play into it. But.
Well, part of just is how I was raised and growing up. I was a farmer growing up, right? And we had this old swather cutting hay. And it was a little single cab swather, and the AC didn't work. I remember one day, it was 100 outside, 120 inside the cab. And I get asthma too. So that's another thing.
So you got to keep the
So
doors
if I
closed.
keep the door open, I can't breathe. And if I close it, I'm dying. And
Win-win.
Yeah, I just remember all day, I was sweating all day, and I felt like I was going to die on that. But that was the most dehydrated I've been in my life. But it's that kind of stuff helped me growing up. That was just kind of normal. And it's but yeah, with running and whatnot, never until now haven't had to focus more on hydrating. But that's definitely something I'm focused on doing better. I've done sweat tests, and I found out what my body does need.
What was your sweat rate?
So within an hour of just a normal, 5 mile, so I think I did 7 miles in an hour, and I shaved off 3.5 pounds of water in that time.
And so about 1.5 liters was what we equated it to, right? So mine, when I do something like that, I'm usually at 2 liters of loss. So you're not that far behind me.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And there's kind of 2 trains of thought in this, where I've heard a guy by the name of Killian, I think it's Jornet, but he's the best trail runner in the world. And when he was younger, he did some crazy experiments basically on himself. And he's known for doing the craziest things ever. Like he went, I don't remember how many days, like 3 or 4 days without drinking any water, but continuing to do running and training and stuff like that before he literally passed out and collapsed. And then he was like, all right, like I know my limit now. And, you know, and he just did some crazy, and then he will do things. He climbed Denali. So the highest peak in the United States is in Alaska, Mount Denali. Or I think, anyways, it's like insane. People go up there for weeks at a time to climb this thing, waiting for weather windows, halfway up at like the base camp at 16, 17,000 feet, etc. No, Killian shows up with his skis and 1 bottle of water and does the entire mountain in a day. Goes up to 20 whatever thousand feet it is, skis all the way up, runs all the way up in a day with 1 bottle of water, right? So there's like this guy who's doing some of the most bizarre things in the world. And I've heard that maybe he doesn't do that anymore, but that's what he's done in the past, right? And then there's the other school of thought of like, no, like nail your hydration, keep your body fueled, you know, doing that kind of stuff is just going to do more harm than good. You know, it's very interesting. And I think it's all personal. I mean, I don't think anyone has a 100% perfect answer, but for me, I wanted to actually do some low fluid training this year. I thought that would be interesting to try to train your body. You know, if you did mess up on an aid station or you did mess up in the field, to be able to bounce back from those kinds of things. I think that might be something you can train, but I've had well-established runners also tell me that's dumb, don't do it. So I ended up not doing any of that, but I always wanted to. So maybe I'll come back to the idea of purposely running low on fluids, you know, in a controlled, safe environment that would allow my body to learn to adapt. But
yeah,
at the same time, I consume so much fluid, I'm always dehydrated.
It's just funny who you listen to or talk to. Like if you listen about like Courtney DeWalter, you know, like she goes into it with the attitude like, yeah, you know, like, it's going to be okay. Like she doesn't.
So positive.
She doesn't put in a ton of effort into what she's putting in her body. I think she just does it on Skittles, you know, like, and
she eats a lot of pizza,
Skittles, like the guy that just Aurelian Sanchez, like he had a lot of hamburgers, you know, so it's like, I think the analytics are important, but it's like, I don't know, I'm kind of the same mindset. I'm going to eat when I feel hungry and try to when I'm not hungry. It's like, and I'm going to try to, you know, get as much water in as often as I think about it, you know, and hopefully that's every 10 minutes I'm thinking about taking another sip, you know, like that's kind of my thoughts on it. And
yeah,
so we could break it down and people can try their own things, but I don't know. That's just kind of how I've always been. I don't know if that's a bad thing to try, but that's just kind of the mindset I have when I go into it.
Well, I don't think it's ever not worked for you, right? So why would you have a different mindset?
All right. That's, for me specifically, it's like I've read a lot of articles like gut health, you know, like when you're out running and whatnot, and you know, your body is literally taking away blood from your digestive tract to power everything else. So you eat too much and it makes you feel sick. And I've had that happen just from this training. It's like, man, I've got to pay attention to the types of food I put in because it's just going to sit in my gut all day long. If it's just if I eat a sandwich out there, it's great for after, but during a run, it's not a good mix for me. Yeah. So sticking with gummies, you know, some of the easier digestive type foods is something I have to like practice with before the run in a couple weeks. So
last year I basically ran straight past the aid station tables and went and just grabbed my own food at my own, like with my own aid station. This year, my goal is to not do that.
Yeah.
Definitely try to get as much fruit as they have there. You know, bananas, watermelon, just anything like that I think would have been, you know, digest easy. It's quick, it's good. And it's not just manufactured sugars, it's more natural sugars. Mm-hmm. But so that's one of my personal goals is to try to actually eat at the aid stations. And, you know, if I am going to stop there, then, you know, take advantage of it. I actually went back through and pulled the stats. I was at aid stations for an hour of the race last year.
That's crazy.
Which blew my mind.
It's realistic, you know.
Yeah, I had, what is that? 5 aid stations in my run.
I think I'll have 8 in mine for the little longer distance.
Yeah, you'll come back to one of them twice, you know, so So yeah, I think we have the same aid stations on the mountain. You just come to them
Yeah.
more often with some extra little loops and stuff. But yeah, I think that's one of my big goals is, I think the whole concept for me is if I can keep hitting my marks, then I'll feel good enough to eat things, and like there's one aid station I definitely was at for, I think over 20 minutes, which was a big part of that, but I was feeling so sick, so trashed, but I couldn't eat the food they had because my gut was just so messed up at that point. So to me, I think, if I was to lay out my strategy for this, especially in the first half of the race, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to not race, to not push times, to not do anything except hit my hydration marks and my fueling marks. Because if I can do that, then I'll be able to finish the race strong. And I was losing hours of time on the second half of the race in sections versus minutes of time, right? And so I probably pushed too hard to gain minutes of time on the front end, and it cost me hours of time on the back end. So
I can attest to that. I mean, just from going on your one trail run with you the other day. So he had a fast pace. Like it's like faster than what I'm going to be doing. I know that. It's like I kept up with him, but like at the end of that race, I was like, man, like that was fast. It's like any uphill, like we ran it, but like I know that on my specific race, like any uphills, like I'm going to have to just hike it.
Yeah.
It's like, and so I think if you went in there with that same speed, I mean, maybe that's just normal for you. Maybe you can just go that far and push it for another 20 miles after that. But I was like, man, after that first 20, I would be pretty poop for the second half.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's going to have to be a really big thing is that first section really lures you in. So from the start to All United Aid Station, because it doesn't, on the map, it doesn't look like one of the big outliers, right?
Yeah.
So like it's not hiking up and over Delano Peak. It's not dropping down off the mountain and turning around and climbing back up. But it has, I want to say, 2,000 feet of elevation in it. And it's just kind of like sneaky elevation. And I think it really kind of lured me in to push a little too hard the first go around. And so I really just want to nail that section way better. And I think that'll pay big dividends.
Yeah, just run your own race. I can imagine having everyone else just running their own race. It's just hard not to keep up with the crowd, like whatever they're doing.
It really is. I think if you can be as humble as you possibly can in the first section, it's going to pay big dividends in the last section. And I think that's the benefit of, having run or spoken with people who've run or whatever it is. Like that's kind of the wisdom that comes from experience. And as much as you just study, trail time is always the key, if you're a backpacker and you're like, oh, I listen to all this stuff, I train, I think I can do 20 miles a day backpacking. Like I promise you that the first time you go to do 20 miles a day, you will learn stuff about yourself. You will see stuff you didn't know before. And, I like to, the older I get, the more I like to say this, that I think when I was younger, I've always loved to learn. I love to study. I'd learn. And I probably thought that I knew a lot more than I did. And now that I'm in my 30s, I'm an old timer.
Still young.
I equate it to, I learned a ton in my 20s, but I'm like transferring it through experiences into wisdom in my 30s. And wisdom to me is the application of the knowledge and living through the application of the knowledge to see what the other side result is going to be. And so I definitely think I like last race, I came in with a lot of knowledge. I had consumed books. I'd talked to a lot of people. I had all this knowledge, but I didn't have any wisdom. I had zero wisdom. And I'm hoping that having run this before, I can use that to my advantage, knowing myself personally too, because that's kind of where wisdom really matters is it's gathering data, but then it's applying it to you specifically. And so yeah, that's definitely a big thing for me is hit my hydration marks. I remember specifically getting to that first aid station and I had drank 1.5 liters of water. And I remember pulling out the Camelback that I had because I have to take that much water. I pretty much carry almost 3 liters of water between aid stations because I'm such a heavy sweater. But I remember pulling out the Camelback and it was almost full, and my heart just plummeted, and I realized just how much I'd messed up the hydration already in the first 8 miles, just right out of the gate. And I was like, oh no. And it wasn't very far after that when I started to kind of pay for that. So as far as just other aspects of training, how have you been training? What's kind of been your strategy there?
So I can actually talk about it. So I kind of do a mixture of like full body training and running. I can get burned out with running pretty easy. So I run 3 times a week. I'll do, anywhere, like the first 2 runs in the week are more mile distance, anywhere from 5 to 10 miles. It just depends on how much time I have. And then I'll do 1 long run on a Saturday. And that Saturday run, I've been progressively making longer until I hit my peak week, which is about a week ago. I actually probably peaked a week too early. It's like, but that's kind of what my plan has been. And anytime I get any extra time to run, then I would do that. And so that was kind of where it was. It was really eye-opening. So I talked about the Grand Canyon earlier, and my training for that was what it had been for years. It was just like, oh, I'll run 5 to 6 miles every day, like Monday through Friday. And when you actually get into training for long-distance running, like for a marathon, for ultra runs, it's different. Like you hit past that 5 miles and you're like, man, this wall is hitting really quick. And I felt that on the Grand Canyon. I was like, I was so underprepared. As soon as we hit 12-mile mark, I was like, I'm cramping. I don't know what's going on. I pushed way too hard, like that downhill just tore up my quads. So for this run, my idea was to get as many miles on feet for as long as possible while comfortably. And I think that's the key for ultra running, is learning to run comfortably, not faster, but like something that's sustainable for an all-day run. And when I first started this training, my paces were way too fast. I remember my Garmin watch, would say, 7-minute mile or something like that, 8-minute mile, and that was kind of
consistently run fast your whole time because you'd run just crazy fast treadmill miles.
Yeah, I took my wife, her name's Danny, I took her out with me, and she'd like yell at me like, you need to slow down. And I was like, oh shoot, like a couple blocks right there. Like she kind of get mad. And I was like, I'm training for a marathon. So it was kind of contentious. But then I was like, I was an idiot, and I was like, I've really got to slow down. So now, like those have really dropped, to where I'm lucky to hit 5 miles in an hour. So like that's putting in the elevation. Like it really just slows it down, and that just makes it more of a comfortable pace for me. And so my training has kind of been built on slowing things down, watching my heart rate, and then increasing the mileage each week, so it's not as much of a shock to my system.
Yeah. You also worked up to like what kind of mileage in a week was your peak week?
So on that week, I think I hit 60. It's the same as the race day. It was like 62 miles.
Nice.
So it was about 31, 20. Yeah, it's about 61 miles for that peak week. So
yeah, that's phenomenal. That's typically the rule of thumb, is to do as many miles in a week as you're going to do on race day. So I know your training plan kind of had you doing back to back like 30-mile days, but to me that would have been, if you wanted to if you were in a position to just crush this race, like, you know what I mean? Like that's to me that was almost like extreme, but I would say that hitting 62 miles in that week is a phenomenal peak week. Yeah,
like just the time consumption for those 30+ mile days. I mean, it's intense, and so I'm a family guy just like Tayson. I've got 3 kids, and they are demanding of my time. And so I got up at 3, to get that, and I wasn't home until like 8:30, 9. It took like 6 hours.
Yeah, the really good runners that I know that aren't professional, meaning they have jobs, they don't have kids,
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you can't do both, but I think that storyline sums up my training, which is maximizing as much as I can. And what I did with my training is similar to Darren. Obviously, he was training for an even longer race, but what I did was I was just trying to constantly optimize, constantly maximize my time running, the prep time, the the shower, even down to like how much time it takes to shower and get back to the office or something after a run, etc. And essentially what I came to the conclusion of was that I would get the most benefit for me personally too, and what I felt like I needed, doing only 2 runs a week, but making them bigger runs. And so I was typically doing something like an 8-mile run and then a 15 or bigger mile run towards the end of things. My peak week didn't quite go as well as I wanted it to, but I got up to about 30 miles. And then this week has been just a super weird week where I've got a ton of work stuff going on. And then next week we head out to do 100 miles on the Colorado Trail, which isn't like the most ideal thing for training, but at the same time, I'm very hopeful that it is the most ideal thing for training. It's very unconventional, but so next week I will be doing 20 miles a day at extremely high altitudes, and I'll be doing that for a week. And then we have basically the race week, which I'll do nothing that whole week until Saturday, and then we'll race. And so it's a really weird position. It kind of like that was just the scheduling and stuff that happened for me. But yeah, my peak week was about 29. But the nice thing about my training this year, I would say, was that I got, 15-mile run in here, 16-mile run in here, 20-mile run in here. So I mean, last year I just didn't get the opportunity to make those happen. This week it was a 15-mile week, a 10-mile week, or 10-mile and a 15-mile run. And so what I feel like is for me to get the most benefit, the things that I needed was I needed to get to 10 miles or more, because that was where fueling started to matter for me. Hydrating and fueling. And that was one of the biggest things I was trying to constantly test, try to get more food down in me, try to make that more of a habit, try to get more water. And I think that I did accomplish more of that, a lot more of that, which I was very happy with. And so even with 2 runs a week, them taking anywhere from 2 hours to 3 hours or more towards the end, I mean, getting up to 20 miles, that was about a 4+ hour run, because I'm not running flat ground miles. I heavily prioritize getting elevation, because this race is just straight up, straight down. It's just, there's pretty much no flat miles in this dang thing. I mean, there are, but it's really is just straight up, straight down. And so I was really trying to push the elevation side of things as much as I could. Let me see if I can switch this on my screen to look at this. So like my peak week, I got just under 6,000 feet of climbing. And in all reality, I wish that was a lot more, because the race itself for my distance has 12 to 13,000 feet of climbing. So next week when I'm on the Colorado Trail, I'll get like 20,000 feet. So that'll be one of the biggest benefits of that. I'll be climbing, and I'll have more weight on my body than, because I'll have a pack on versus what I'm running with. So that will be really helpful for me. But I definitely don't go do runs that I don't find elevation in, especially the last 2.5 months. And so some of these runs I was getting 3,500 feet of climbing, 3,800 feet of climbing, 37. So I was getting a lot of, just under 4,000 feet of elevation climb and descent in some of these runs. And so that definitely knocks down the number of miles I'm doing, because you just can't run, straight up mountains.
You can't.
So, but with that, I feel confident. So I'm going to go out on some limbs here. I feel confident that training was right for me. It's how I pictured it. I optimized time very well, going out on a 2-hour run early in the week, and then finding time on, say, Friday or something to do a 3-hour or longer run, 4-hour run. That worked pretty well for me to be able to manage that, both in terms of work and home. The hardest part is when I was traveling or things like that. That would kind of derail some of my training. But bang for buck, it takes time to drive to a trailhead. It takes time to drive back to it from a trailhead. It takes time to shower and get cleaned up. And so, yes, if I could run more, I would. If I had time to run more, I would. But to me, getting 2 solid runs in a week where I'm really stressing my body and then giving my body a day or two to recover was the strategy. And I'm hopeful that it pays off.
Yeah.
So
that's how I am feeling. I'm hopeful.
Yeah. So let's get into some pre-race predictions and goals here, Darren. I guess I'll start with what happened last year for me. I finished the race at 17 hours. Not my goal. It was about 11 p.m. at night. And I wanted to finish by 9 p.m., which would allowed me to finish in the daylight, and I think I would have just finished with my head held a little bit higher. And that's not what happened. So 17 hours was the time that I was out there. I think that I can cut that down, and that would be the goal for sure. And as I break that down, to me, let's see, I've kind of done some of the math. I'm trying to see if this sheet that I printed out had some of that math in it, because there's sections here. So for instance, this is the same section. There's only one section of the trail that I run twice. It's the first section and the last section. And the first time I ran it in 2 hours and 3 minutes. And when I was coming back, I ran it in 3 hours and 30 minutes. So an hour and a half longer in the one section there. And then you can I could go through and see these different sections that man, the times just started to creep up so significantly. So as I go through some of those and just be like, okay, if I added time there, but then subtracted some time here, I think for sure goal number one for me is to run it in the 15 hours, which would have me finishing in the daylight. I'm optimistic that I can maybe do it faster than that I might be able to finish, I don't know, say another hour earlier than that. And that's as much as I want to predict. I think that's as much experience as I have. I can't really hope for much more than that, but at the same time, you're always hoping for more than that. But I will say this, the goal is to not hope for anything more than that, especially in the first half of the race. If that comes because I'm feeling good in the second half of the race, nothing else, right? So that's my goal, would be to shave about 2 or more hours off of my time from last year. If I can do that, I will feel good, because to me, that would mean, in order to do that, I will have run a lot more of the race instead of hiked a lot of the race. Essentially the whole, a massive, more than half of the race, my legs were in such pain that I just kept trying to run. I'd run 10 steps and I'd be in so much excruciating pain I'd have to walk again. And I'd just do that over and over, and it was really miserable. So to me, if I can continue to, if I can run the last downhill before the little climb up to the finish, then I will feel very happy and accomplished that I did some things right that day. But that's kind of my
nice.
Hope, so
nice. I think that's good.
What about for you?
For me, the main goal is to finish. And, it's a 24-hour cutoff time. So for the 100K, I've talked to Tayson about this, but if I could maintain a 3 mile per hour average, and that's...
Is that your moving time, or is that average with stops?
Well, that's moving time. So no, that's with stops. So that'd be the average, all day long. If I can do that, then it's going to be a 20-hour day.
Okay.
And so if I can finish in 20 hours, that's kind of the goal right now. Even bigger goal is to not get injured, So if I can finish without injury, that would be my heart of hearts in this whole thing. As far as times, I don't really care. If I can just say I did it, like I said, one and done for me, and it will be one and done. So
the 20-hour mark for you,
that just makes it so I'm not getting done really past 1 in the morning.
Okay. You start an hour earlier than I do.
Yeah, it starts at 5.
So, will that put you at 1 in the morning? 20 hours?
Isn't that? I think so.
Okay. Yeah, that's some night hiking, man.
It is some night hiking.
I guess that's
early morning hiking, and
it's only 2 hours longer than I went last year, I guess, into the night. So, and it's not, for me, it wasn't too bad. There's people out there on trails. You see headlamps. It doesn't feel like you're just out there in the middle of the woods hiking at night in a bad situation where it could get worse. But I was nervous for people out there.
Yeah,
I was. There was people I'd see at aid stations that I'm like, dude, the aid station, the last aid station you hit is in the middle of nowhere. It would take hours to drive there in a vehicle, and there's not much help and there's not much support up there. I was kind of nervous. For people, and I would love to talk to a race director or something at some point and see how many people quit at that aid station, or how that works, because I imagine if people are going to quit, that's the area, and you're in the middle of nowhere, which is pretty tough.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, main goal is to finish. I think we both kind of have that attitude. Like if we start, we're going to finish something. And so barring injury, like that's still the goal. So
yeah. I think you'll finish. I think you'll finish. I think you'll. I have no idea on times. That's such an unknown. You know what I mean? But in my mind, unless you royally screwed up, which I don't think you would, I think you'll. Even if you had to stop at an aid station for an hour, you know what I mean, and try to eat and drink or something. But you never know. People even fall down, and I mean one of the people I like to cheer for is Hayden Hawks. He's from the area, and he just fell in a race and DNF'd, and got injured. And so you just never know what can happen out there. But
I was looking
from a training perspective, I think you've trained enough. It's just kind of the execution and what happens.
That's how I see it. I was actually looking at like race times and finishers for that race, and there was this guy that finished at 23 hours and 59 minutes and 50 seconds. I'm like, can you imagine this guy sprinting at the end? Like, I'm going to finish. I'm not going to DNF. Like, congrats to that guy. Like, that's awesome. He did it, and I would be happy to be that guy, to get it 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 50 seconds. 10 seconds left on that clock.
You know what's interesting about all of that is I think biology does just play a big role in things, because there's people out there that were cruising past me.
Yeah.
They were bigger than me, did not look in shape, did not look healthy, but you could tell this wasn't their first ultra. Mm-hmm. You could just tell like they had experience and that they weren't carrying much water. And I'm like, how can you be, bigger than me, carrying less water than me, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's all sorts of factors. But I remember I passed this one guy at about 10 miles in for me. He was a part of the 100K. I wonder if that was the dude. I wanted to know so bad. I wish I would have looked at his bib number to see, because passing him that early on when they started an hour ahead of you was kind of like, oh boy, this guy's in for it. But he was a big dude, signed up for the 100K, and he was just motoring along at a very slow, but I would imagine consistent speed. And I would love to know. I mean, he had to have been 275 pounds or something, and shorter than me or something. But I kind of looked like it wasn't his first attempt, maybe, I don't know. I'd love, like, guys like that where you're just like, man, I'd love to know if they finished or not.
That would be cool.
Because it's interesting. So let's say you do finish. What do you hope to gain out of all of this? If you were just to predict, what are you going to walk away from and say, you know what, I'm so glad I did that because I.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's like a distinct difference between people that just do marathons versus ultras. And I think that difference is that you're not really doing it to prove anything to anyone other than yourself. And for me, this is just a test to myself to see if I can do it. I'm 35, going on 36, and I just want to see if I can do it. And I think it'd be a really cool life accomplishment to have that under my belt. And so it's just for myself. It's not really to prove it to anyone. So that's it for me.
I agree. One of the coolest things about the trail running community is everyone's so positive. I mean, even at the competitive level, people are very friendly and nice to each other. I don't think anyone out there is I don't know, like I would say in sports, like in other sports, it can be very competitive, and you can not like the guy you're playing against, and you can almost wish him ill, and you know, get into that side of things. And then with trail running, everyone's on their own journey, everyone's trying to accomplish their own thing, and everyone's supportive of that, which is really cool. So I would second that. That's a really cool part. Like, I could have said my goal was to run it in 10 hours and win the race, or to run it in just under cutoff. And I think no matter what, people would have been like, sweet, you know, like everyone would support it. So I think it's interesting. I think for me, coming out of it, it's to feel the feeling of I accomplished what I set out to do. I think it's to learn and understand my own body a lot more and feel like because if I am able to run this race and hydrate and fuel properly, I'll have learned a lot about myself that I can use for years and years and years in all forms of backpacking, in all forms of running, in all forms of outdoor exercise. And so, even biking and stuff, like I can translate that stuff over if I can be like, yeah, I really do need 1.5 liters of water. And if I do, I can go all day. I can, I don't need to stop. And so to learn some of those things, and I think those are the biggest ones. To just get that, kind of scratch that itch of just feeling like I finished what I started, or at least from what I hoped to start.
Yep.
I do think that I would say that there's a possibility I'll run a different ultra in the future, but I think it would be, more likely to experience different terrain and country than it would be for anything else. I don't see myself getting competitive. I don't see myself dropping 40 pounds to be competitive in this sport at my height and whatnot. And so it's not something I aspire to do. But I do aspire to just see as much outdoor country as I possibly can, to push my own limits, and to spend as much time outdoors as I can. And sometimes these goals are, this has been two years in a row, having this on the calendar has been one of the most motivating things I've ever done and can do. And so I'm fearful that if I don't have those things, I won't push myself as hard and work as hard. And so, it'll be interesting to see what comes of it from here. For me, I'm not going to predict one way or the other. I think there's a small chance that I would want to do something more extreme, but there's this other side of me that's like, man, this was already extreme enough. So if it required more time away from family and more effort, I think the answer would be no. But if I finished the 70K and just felt great, and said, if I took that same training plan to the 100K and didn't alter anything, then I might consider it. But if I don't, then I don't know.
Yeah,
but,
I can see it.
I'm excited, man. I'm way more excited this year that I don't know. Last year I was nervous excited. This year I'm just excited. It's
kind of where I am, that first one.
Yeah.
Nervous excited. It's like, don't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm. So it'll be fun. The plan is to film it at this point. So we'll attempt to film this and kind of pull together some kind of a documentary to be able to share. And then, of course, we'll do an after-race breakdown of everything and see how close we were on predictions.
Hopefully it turns out good.
One thing that a very wise runner told me is that a ultra race is like living a life condensed into a single day. And what he said by that is, there's going to be the highest of highs that'll hit in that day, and there will be the lowest of lows. And you don't know when they're going to come. You don't know how long they're going to last, but you will experience both ends of that. And so I think as you're out there, Darren, I definitely think about this consistently, but as you're out there, if you hit a low, just run through it and you'll hit a high, and it all evens out. And so I think that's going to be fun to share with people on the tail end of this. I want to hear what your lows are. I want to hear what your highs are, and just enjoy the story from it. So.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, guys, really appreciate you tuning in today. I hope that you did learn something, and I hope that you can take this back and apply it, or inspired by it. I do firmly believe that setting big goals is one of the best ways to change behaviors and to see real results in life. One of the best goals that you can set is to sign up for our 100-mile challenge next year with us. We have hundreds and hundreds of people that have set big goals this year and have been out accomplishing them on the trails. It's very fun to see them change their behaviors, drop weight, increase trail miles, do things that they never thought that they could. And you can totally do that with us in a DIY format through our 100-mile challenge. Now, we won't be opening up registration for that until next year, but make sure to put on your calendars and join us, because it's one of the most cool and powerful things that we do. In the meantime, other things going on, make sure that you check out the pre-sale on the CS40. It is currently available for pre-sale. It'll be shipping in the month of August, as long as there's not any crazy delays that are unexpected and unforeseen. But right now, they'll be shipping in August. It's a phenomenal pack, and you can save some money on that. And if you didn't know, we released some new products over the last couple of months. The Skyline shorts. I'll be running in the Skyline shorts for this ultra. I don't know about you, but and the Altitude hoodie. Those are my two absolute go-tos for training and for hiking. So you can get those. Those are new releases. We did release the Altitude in a t-shirt, long sleeve and short sleeve. So that's the newer side of the altitude releases. But go check those out. They're great for training. They're great for hiking. And they're great for altitude, as is implied in the name. We will be running on the Skyline Trail for part of this race, which is where the Skyline Trail shorts got their name as well. So anyways, go check those out. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you've left a review. That really does help us. And we'll see you guys in a future episode.